Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk metal. Before we get into today's topic, should point out that the Christmas tree back here is going to be sort of in and out of videos coming up. I've recorded several videos ahead of time before the Christmas tree got set up. So in this video, there's a Christmas tree in the background. Next week, there may not be a Christmas tree in the background, and the week after that, the tree may be back. I'm not taking the tree down every other week. It's just will depend on which video I release each week. This week's video, we're looking at something that happened today, which is Black Friday. Went out to one of the local record stores. It is record store day, but to be honest, I've never gotten into the whole record store day thing. There's been a couple of releases over the years that are kind of cool, but in general, there's usually not much stuff I'm interested in. And so, yeah, I don't go to record stores specifically for record store day. I went to the record store this morning at 7:30 in the morning when it was below freezing and extremely cold because they had a collection brought in recently. Longtime record collectors tend to understand that around the holiday season, a lot of people do sell records. Just cleaning out the house or getting money for holiday expenses, end of year, whatever. A lot of used records tend to be brought into stores right around this time of the year. And when I was at the store recently, they mentioned that, yeah, somebody had just brought in a big collection that included a fair bit of heavier metal stuff, a lot of hard rock and heavy metal. And they said that, yeah, they were going to put it out on the shelves along with all the record store day stuff on Black Friday. So it's like, okay, I guess I'll need to be there Black Friday morning. So let the family sleep in. I got up early, went out in the freezing cold, stood in line. There were already like 20 people or more in line by the time I got there. And it was frigid, especially for around here. It was like 28 degrees this morning. But this collection turned out to be extremely nice, not just in terms of having a lot of really good records, but also in terms of condition. The person, told the folks at the store that basically their strategy had been they would buy things on vinyl back during the 1980s, but they would just immediately run the vinyl onto cassette, dub it onto a tape, and then just play to the tape all the time. So most of the records show extremely little wear because they didn't get played very much. They were stored and kept really clean. So yeah, the condition is superb on a lot of these. And I got a lot of stuff out of this collection. Fortunately, I did have a decent amount of trade credit with this store, so I didn't have to, pay out of pocket. I couldn't have bought this entire stack of records if it had all been cash. That would have been way outside the budget. But thankfully, yeah, trade credit was a thing. That's helped out quite a bit. Not going to say a ton about the records. Most of these are well-known bands and well-known albums. They're just things I either didn't have an original vinyl copy of, or I had a copy, but like a really worn out, like flea market type copy. There's 17, I think. I lost count. That's just, well, you can count along if you want, but I think there's about 17. Without further ado, let's show some really, really cool stuff. Very excited these showed up. Up first, we have the debut Metal Church album. And yes, this is. I'm not going to pull every record out to show stuff, but Metal Church is worth it because, yes, it's the old original Ground Zero pressing. That's the other thing that's nice about this collection. 99% of the stuff in it is all original press copies, not reissues or later things. So, yeah, I don't know if I'd ever seen an original Ground Zero press of this in person before. It does not turn up in person very often. I was expecting it not to be. I was like, well, that's a nice copy, but it's probably, one of the later ones. No, it's not. I'm like, okay, I'll take that. Next up, we've got Abattoir's Vicious Attack. This is on a Green Combat label pressing. I had this on a cassette tape, 30 years ago, but yeah, never had a nice copy of it that wasn't on a, a $3 used cassette tape. Great album. The band has connections to Agent Steel, of course. Kind of in a similar vein, but a little heavier, thrashier. Great stuff. Let's see. Now, up next are, I think, the only two reissues in the stack, but they're interesting ones. We've got a copy of the Warfare Noise compilation. This is an Osmos pressing, not an old original pressing. And, fans of, brutal South American 80s metal will know this one, featuring, Holocausto, Sarcophago, Mutilator, etc. Yeah, I'd always kind of wanted a copy of this. Tracking down an original in decent condition seems like it would probably be a chore. So, yeah, I was happy to pick this up as a reissue. Let's see. Also a reissue, but a nice one. The Story of Death SS. So this is the compilation. There's a gatefold. Um, this is the NWN pressing, and it is on the purple vinyl. I always had kind of a soft spot for this band. I like the horror shtick. It's very raw. The music sometimes doesn't always hold together extremely well. It can be pretty crude and rough around the edges. But a band that I always found kind of interesting, and I never had a copy of the Story of compilation before. I've got, a few other Death SS things, but never did have this one except, just as MP3s from a CDR trade. So I was like, oh, well, okay. It may be a more recent NWN press, but it still looks really nice, like the purple foil on it. Yeah, we'll pick that up. All right, getting back to the 80s original vinyl stuff, we've got Queensryche's The Warning debut album, classic. Again, I don't need to spend a ton of time talking about this record, but yeah, you can get a good sense of, the condition for these. Just really, I rarely call records near mint. If it's got even a few little dings on it, I've learned it's just better to go ahead and call it excellent, and then people aren't going to gripe or argue with you about condition. A lot of these things are really close to near mint. Uh, Also, Rage for Order, maybe the best Queensryche album ever made. I think this one does sort of, walk in the shadow of Operation Mindcrime. Hmm? Hmm? Some of you see what I did there. As great as Operation Mindcrime is, I've always felt like I like this album just a little bit better, although it's extremely close. It'd be one of the hardest, which do you like better kind of pairings that I've ever thought of. But yeah, Rage for Order, absolutely great. The only knock against this album is maybe the production, and I don't mind the production, but it does have that very mid 80s kind of thin production. Whereas Mindcrime, you've got, the really amazing production job. But Rage for Order, yeah, a fantastic album. Up next, we've got Overkill with the Fuck You EP. Now, I thought I had this on vinyl, but I've been cleaning out a lot of the record shelves lately, and I noticed that I didn't have this on the shelf. I'm like, maybe I used to have it and got rid of it. Maybe I only had it like on a cassette or a CDR or something. But I was like, oh, okay, goofy. I guess I don't have it. And then it was there in the collection pile. So I was like, okay, I guess now I'll have it. Fair enough. Up next, we've got some Savatage of vinyl, starting with The Dungeons Are Calling. And unless I'm mistaken, this is also a green combat. Yep, there you go. Great EP. I prefer the EP a lot compared to the original Sirens album. Sirens is fine. Sirens has some killer tracks on it. But I feel like everything on this EP is really great. Midas Night, City Beneath the Surface, By the Grace of the Witch is a great track that's overlooked. Dungeons, of course, Visions, The Whip. Yeah, it's, a monstrously good EP. The turkey baster thing through the eye socket on the skull always made me chuckle a bit. Yeah. Now, this is one I had on vinyl as a kid, but I had a very used copy of it. It, cover, was pretty worn. I guess the record played okay. I'd long since traded it away. I've got it on a CD compilation that, two on one thing from Combat that also has sirens with the creepy elf children holding the knives. But yeah, I didn't have a standalone copy of the Dungeons of Calling. Haven't for a long time. And again, the condition on these is just crazy good. Very little wear anywhere on the covers or on the records. It obviously took a while looking through all this stuff, but um, yeah, there's just very little wear. We're not done with Savatage yet. Also, Power of the Night. This is another one I think I had as a kid, but just, a very kind of, a flea market copy. A copy I got, for $1 or two at a, cheap cutout bin at a record show or a flea market, probably. This copy's not cut out and is not got a lot of ring wear or any kind of wear on it. Really, really beautiful copy. Um, Glad I had a lot of trade credit available because let's just say I don't have any trade credit left. But wait, we're not done with Sabotage. Also, a copy of Hall of the Mountain King. A lot of people love this album. I think this album still probably gets a little undersold or sort of underappreciated in terms of, the real top US metal albums from the 80s. Came out a little later. Thrash was already kind of, the dominant force in metal. But this is an absolute monster. This can easily go toe to toe with anything from, Omen and Warlord and the other groups that, are typically put at the top of that 80s US power metal list. This album, I haven't worked out like, top 25 favorite albums of all time in a long time, so I can't say, but All of the Mountain King could probably work its way onto that list. It might be a top 25 album all time for me. Fantastic. Savatage at their peak. And a quick break here, something you may be noticing again, there's no like cult, independent, unsigned bands in this collection. This whole collection was very much recognizable stuff. The person that collected this, you could tell they liked a lot of hard and heavy music, but they were sticking to, pretty well-known bands on established labels for the most part. Queensryches, Savages, metal churches, things of that nature. They had, some Metallica vinyl. Those are more expensive. They had like a nice early copy of And Justice for All. And that's not an album I like enough to spend a lot of money on a copy of. But it's that kind of collection. They had a ton of like Saxon albums, 80s era Black Sabbath albums, all the 80s Judas Priest albums you could ever want. Um, so yeah, that's very much what the collection focused on. There's not a lot of extreme stuff. The Warfare Noise and the Death SS were very clear outliers in the collection. Most of it is more straightforward. They have, I think, the first three Ozzy albums on early pressings. That's exactly the kind of stuff this collection made up of. Some Accept, some Anvil. You get the idea. Got a few more to go through here. Just wanted to throw that in for folks that might be interested in the collection. I know some folks in the Carolinas watch these videos from time to time. The store, if I did, oh, I don't think I mentioned it. Yeah, it's Pharmacy Records up in Greenville, South Carolina. So yeah, if you're in the area and any of this stuff sounds interesting to you, everybody else there was there for record store day releases. I was there for digging through this collection, and there's a lot of other cool stuff there if you're in the mood to go spend some money. Uh, Next up, we've seen a lot of good bands, but other bands play. This band kills. So yeah, I got some Manowar vinyl. Battle Hymns, the debut. This is one. Well, there's a quick story about this one, but we'll get to it. This is one of the only ones that shows a little bit of wear. There's a little bit of ring wear there at the top front and the top back, but other than that, nothing really. Nice original press on Battle Hymns. A goofy album in their catalog, but I've always kind of liked it. It has some odd songs on it that would not have fit onto later albums. Later albums like Into Glory Ride, which was also there. Now, the goofy story with Manowar, these first two albums I did have vinyl copies of as a kid, and my mom got them for me. She used to go to record shows with my dad a lot of the time. And for whatever reason, I wasn't along for this particular record show. Mom doesn't collect records. She, had a few, but she didn't collect anything. With the Man of War, there's like, one crease right there. There, you can kind of see it right there. That's about the only condition issue. But anyway, Mom would go to record shows with Dad and flip around, just look at stuff. But she would keep an eye out for anything that looked interesting to me. And yeah, she saw these. I don't know if Manowar was a band I had talked about some, or sometimes I would scribble down some band names on a piece of paper for them to keep an eye out for. And Mom was always good to do that. So yeah, at some point she had picked up, very used copies of Indigo Ride and Battle Hymns for me, which was super cool of her. Those copies are long gone. Again, they weren't in great shape. I played them for a long time. I eventually traded them or sold them. I don't have any idea when. So it's kind of nice to get those back on vinyl. And these copies, again, are extremely nice, clean copies on vinyl. Hmm. What's better than Man of War? More Man of War. Sign of the Hammer is not one you see on vinyl very often. The most overlooked album in their catalog by far, killer track list. Um, I usually say it is my favorite Man of War album. There's got lots of others. It's a band I like a lot. But Sign of the Hammer, just, yeah, killer track list and very, very unsung album. Usually, this is the one that gets all the attention. Hail to England, and rightfully so. It's an amazing album, and it's very close. Again, we're talking Do You Like a Rage for Order or Operation Mindcrime better? Sign of the Hammer, Hail to England. Eh, I'm personally going to take Sign of the Hammer, but barely. And again, just beautiful copy of this. This was the album that kind of cued me in that the collection was going to be worth showing up in the freezing cold morning for. Because when I talked to them recently at the store, again, they had just gotten the collection. None of the stuff was tagged. It wasn't, they weren't ready to try to sell any of it. But they had a few of the records there starting to look them up, and this was the record that was on top of the stack. I'm like, that's a that's like an old original copy of Hail to England, isn't it? Like, yeah, I'll be back on Black Friday. You said you're selling it Friday. Okay, I'll be back Friday to dig through this stuff. So yeah, never had this one or Sign of the Hammer on vinyl before. So yeah, I think I am all Man-O-War'd up. But wait, we're not quite done. This is an album I've never owned or never heard, but I've always wanted to check more out by the band. Chicago's Snow White. Again, just a tiny bit of ringwear at the top, but everything else is super clean on these. So yeah, this is All Hail to Thee, their debut from, it's either from 83 or 84. A few very small creases at the top, but again, it's an extremely nice. Most, if not all of these, like have the original inner sleeves with them too, while lyric printed sleeves and such. So cool stuff. This band I've never checked out very much. I feel like I probably had a copy of Hand of God at some point in my life, but I don't remember a thing about it. So was happy to pick that up. There's two left in the stack. Neither of these are metal things, but they're metal adjacent and pretty interesting. Interesting enough that I added them to the stack. We've got, well, this is a record store day record, but not from the current record store day. I think this was record store day 2012. There was a version of Misfits Walk Among Us put out. And I think they did several colors of vinyl. This particular one is on red vinyl, which kind of fits not just with the cover, but also with it being on Ruby Records. Um, Classic album, classic band, love Misfits stuff. I'm a bit of a sucker for Misfits vinyl and will pick these kind of things up. Would like to collect more of the older original stuff, but of course the prices for that are just truly insane. But nevertheless, I really didn't have a nice vinyl copy of Walk Among Us. I have an old CD press of it, and I have a bootleg with alternative takes. It was a UK bootleg from not very long ago, a few years ago. So yeah, to get kind of a cool version of it. It's not an original, but it is kind of a cool version on vinyl by one of my favorite bands. I'll absolutely take that. And this last one's kind of the wild card because I don't know much about this band. but I've been curious. They've always been on my list of bands I should probably check out, and they had one of their albums there, and again, it's super clean. And at this point, when you've already got 16 records on the stack, a 17th doesn't make much of a difference. So I'm like, okay, well, this will definitely finally get me to check out at least some of their stuff. It's Swans with Filth, a band I hear about a ton, you know, but to be honest, I know very little about Swans. This is one of the first album I've owned by them. If I don't like it, it might be the last album I own by them. We'll see. But it's what is this, a Neutron or Copy Press, something like that? Interesting. We'll see. But also, it's an autographed copy. Now, this one down here, just making it clear. Yeah, this is, a 20, yeah, 14. If I can get that to focus. There we go. Yeah, so not an original one here. It is autographed by Gira, which, okay, cool. The autographs are not something I pay extra for. I don't mind if something's autographed. It's always hard to confirm whether autographs are legit or not, especially with it being kind of, on the back, out of the way here. That's better. I wouldn't like it as much if it was scrawled all over the front of it. But yeah, figured, okay, I will take a chance and learn a bit about swans. And if I don't enjoy it, I can trade it back in or send it to somebody as VCOT. We'll see how that one goes. Okay, the stack is finally empty. Record store day. Hooray, I'm out of money. Again, went through those kind of fast, but there's not a ton that needs to be said about most of those albums. It's a really cool collection for anybody in the area that wants to go check some of that out. All this stuff is in really, really nice condition. And yes, there's plenty of good stuff left that I didn't pick up. There's more Misfits vinyl, there's more Savatage vinyl. I mentioned just lots of, Priest, Accept, Anvil, Motorhead. There's a lot of nice Motorhead vinyl. I just don't pick up much Motorhead on vinyl. They even had a copy of 1916 on vinyl, which you don't see very often. There's some Blue Oyster Cult. It- like I said, lots. If it was 80s hard rock or metal by sort of known entities, that's what this collection focused on. And really cool one. I haven't seen a collection this nice in terms of condition show up locally for probably about 6 years or so. I think around 2019, there was a nice collection that showed up at a different record store. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was 2019 because I think it was right before COVID took over for a while. But you just don't find a lot of this stuff in this type of condition these days. The guys at the store were really impressed with the collection, and I was pretty impressed with it and glad I could pick up a chunk of it to add to my own collection. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap this one up. So, Black Friday. Who's been out shopping? Did you get any of the record store day releases? There was like a Voivod live album, among other things. Anybody pick that one up or find other things or just other good sales? I know lots of distros and online record labels, stores have been advertising a lot of sales. I've ordered a couple of little things here and there, but very, very little. Since I knew this collection was coming up, I wasn't interested in buying just, a bunch of random online things. Kind of knew I was going to have to use my record budget for this stuff. But yeah, if you found some cool stuff on Black Friday, by all means, list it in the comments below. People always seem to enjoy checking out what other people have found out in the wild or ordered or bought recently. So give everybody some fun stuff to read. All right, let's wrap this on up. Everybody take care. Welcome to the holiday season. And as always, keep banging your head.